Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, and today we are working on the Mercury project. Last video was a pretty big one. We got the rear bumper and gravel pan stuff all buttoned up, and it is looking really good. So now, with the car turned this way in the shop, we're gonna try and button up the last handful of things in the back end of the car before we flip it around. So the exhaust is a big part of that. We had to literally sawzall the tailpipes or rear portion of the exhaust off, more than the tailpipes. The whole back half of the exhaust in front of the radius rods we had to cut off. And we've also been working in the background on getting some of the shocks and stuff figured out. We lowered the front, we lowered the rear like crazy, and obviously now our shocks did not work. Steve's already worked on moving the upper mounting positions to a better location because when we set the car down, the shocks were going to be almost horizontal. So he moved the upper location. We tried the shocks we had on the car before because we did gain some travel doing that, but they still were too long. So we've ordered some shocks. We got the fronts hooked up, so we're going to work on getting the shocks mounted in the front. I'm going to work on getting the exhaust run actually under the rear now because the car sits so low and the rear sits up so high. We can't put it up over anymore because the rear will and radius rods will hit it. So we'll work on getting the exhaust finished, which is going to allow us to put the little chrome tailpipes out under the bumper, which will kind of finish that rear end look of the car. And so we're going to try and get a bunch of that stuff done. Hopefully by the end of this, we can start it up with the Columbia install with the drive shaft they made, the exhaust hooked back up. I'm going to actually put some of these little small universal cheap baffles that we've been using, or glass packs, on some of the other cars. This we just had resonators shoved in. So we put those in, we can hear what it sounds like, we can pull it outside and see how it looks with the new lower stance in the rear, and also make sure that it moves under its own power with the Columbia. So we're gonna have to put some oil in the back, put on jack stands, run the car, and get all the gear oil moving through the Columbia in the rear since it's obviously been rebuilt. So whole bunch of stuff that will just basically equate to the end of the video of us just pulling it outside and going, hell yeah, that looks cool. So that's the idea, that's the whole goal or idea, and let's get started.
All right, so we have our vacuum line run from the engine back to the rear of the car for our Columbia switching gear here. It's a nice looking piece. It's an electrically operated vacuum solenoid. We're gonna mount this at the rear of the car. It's got two hoses coming off it. One goes to your regular everyday driving. The other one goes to the overdrive side. I guess it has vacuum on either side all the time. It has one vacuum in from the engine. We're gonna mount this in the well in the back here, somewhere down this area. Keep it out of the way. There's no kind of motor on it, so it won't be noisy or anything. It's not an air pump of any sort, so it'll be in there. And then we have a switch for the dash that you just mount in the dash and click back and forth for your standard gear ratio or your overdrive gear ratio. And hopefully it's as easy as that.
found these shocks that we ended up using on the front. I must have bought a set of these shocks, a pair of these for something, I don't know what, but in all of my keeper stuff or extra parts above the office in the new building, I have bins with like old shock kits and shocks that we've got that were new old stock that are short and all kinds of stuff just to keep them out of the way in a bin. We were going through and we found these brand new OE Spectrum, they're like Monroe shocks, that's one of their styles of shocks. And we were like, wow, these look pretty good. And we're taking measurements because the shocks that were on it were too long. And these work really good. They worked in the front. We took some measurements in the rear and actually should work just as well in the rear. So the one thing I like about them, they are a modern, I believe, gas shock. They are a little stiffer, which is good because the car sits nice and low. We also don't want to be bouncing the car off of everything. So the nice thing about these shocks versus some of the ones I've found over the years trying to order different shocks, I've always trying to find parts that are like we could order from our local Napa or Advanced or whatever, a lot of these parts, so we're not constantly going to a street rod shop or whatever that may be out of stock or be marked up. So we have these shocks. They are basically like a little over 12 inches when they're fully extended, and I think where they're all the way down, they're just under 9 inches, which for this car is perfect because we, in the rear, it's like 11 3/4 or something is where it's sitting right now for the shock between the eyes, so it'll go down just a little bit. And then fully compressed, it gives us like 3 inches or so of travel, which is really good, or a little under. And in the front, when we added these on the front, because it was almost the same measurements, the front end went from like super bouncy, you could bounce the freaking cross member off the front axle. So we put these on, you could barely get it to go down more than like an inch with our body weight. So we know with going over an overpass and all that, it's not gonna be bouncing or hitting real hard. So these shocks I think are for 50 to 52 Plymouth is what I found the listing for, but the part number is 5752 is the part number that is for the OE Spectrum shocks. So they're very handy if you have a similar problem. They work pretty well, nice and stiff. So we're gonna throw these on, these should work, and then we can now let the rear droop down. It's only gonna droop like an inch, and then we can start making our exhaust under these. So that's the plan.
Thanks.
I'm sure people are going to yell at us because we have a lift and we're literally using the jack of the lift. But the problem is that when you put it up on the lift, the rear end's going to droop, but with no shocks, it's literally going to drop 2 feet. So if we put it up on the lift and use like transmission jacks, we've found that sometimes the spring is stronger than however the science works of it. It lifts the back end of the car off the lift pads before it fully compresses the suspension, so that is a problem. So the only good way we found for this type of stuff is literally put it on a jack stand, do it the old school way. Luckily, we're just literally bolting the shocks on, and we're not doing like all the work. But we have to address those people that are going to yell at us and say we're idiots because we have a lift.
Let me get it. I'll get it.
I think I got it.
We have to keep it real with Steve. We don't want him to get too spoiled
Exactly.
with the using the lift all the time. So that's why we actually do this.
Got to keep me humble.
Yeah. Steve goes home and then he's like, "Where's my lift at? I can't work under these conditions." Honey, we need a lift.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. There we go. Oh my. Yeah. That's a little longer.
Let's look at the difference here. So this is fully extended on what we had on there. That's fully extended on our new shock. So basically, I think when we looked at the measurements, this shock at full extension it was only like half an inch or something. Full extension, this shock is only like half an inch longer than this, or no. Yeah, then this one was at full compression. So we were literally probably getting a quarter or half an inch of travel with that shock, but this was the one this is like what was in it basically. So yeah, so we're gonna
At stock ride height, that worked.
so throw that guy on.
Alrighty.
Do you want some spray lube to?
Yeah.
That'll slide
just
on.
a little bit.
Okay, let me see that.
A little lube makes the world go round.
All right, so got that one on. We're gonna take the other one off. Then we can drop her down and see how the suspension travel is. See what hits, if anything hits, and then we can start building our exhaust. Okay, see if it drops any lower than it was before. Doesn't really seem like it. Now we don't got that pogo bounce anymore.
Right,
I don't really want to step on the bumper like.
But yeah, maybe not just yet.
That's pretty good. I mean, it's got travel, but
Yeah, it's a way. Right, before you could do it with one hand.
that's pretty
It's just
good.
the spring on it.
Yeah. So now the question will be, after we start driving it, does it bang on anything over? And we can't recreate the weight of this car at 50, 60 miles
No,
an hour
yeah.
going down.
Yeah,
So
there's-
hopefully we'll see if anything bangs on that. And
Yeah.
that'll answer a question. I should have looked what the space is between the axle and the pickup on the frame.
That's true.
Well, it's gonna be hard to see.
It'd be hard to get my noggin under there.
Well, we had it on jack stands, would have been the time.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah. It would have been. Oh, it's probably 2.5 inches,
Okay. Well, the shocks only have,
3 inches of travel.
yeah, so we're not much different.
No.
So if it starts hitting the frame, we'll do a small little C-notch
Mm-hmm.
that'll equal whatever the shocks bottom out at, and that's kind of like your, and
Yeah.
you put a bump stop just before that so you're not breaking shocks off.
Yep.
All right, so we got the car up in the air. We got these cool Eastwood lights a bunch of people have been asking about. They're like great for under a lift. It's got a tripod on. You can actually aim them straight up. So we've been running them a little higher because it blinds us and it also blinds the camera. So I'll try and get it a little lower so you can see, but you can angle them and it works pretty well. So what we were running into, you could see already here, the exhaust used to go like up over the radius rods because the car sat a lot higher, and even with us having almost no droop now, you could see that it would run right into it. So that's why we cut them off. So what I have to do is back here at this mount area is cut this here somewhere and actually bring it down under the radius rod, and then it's going to go straight under the rear, under the gas tank, leave a little air gap, and then it's going to line back up with the bumper. So it's actually more of a straight shot. The real only bend I have to do is right here just to get it to go underneath of the radius rod when it's at full droop. So I may do kind of a whoop-de-doo here, that's a technical term, whoop-de-doo that goes down around and gets it back up to where we want it, you know, lining right up with going under the Columbia stuff here. So everything's hooked up. Steve's been working on the brakes. He's got the e-brake cable he's gonna work on here shortly and all that stuff. And then we got a little bit of wiring back here just for our taillights and stuff that's hard to see with the lighting, but so that's what we got going on. So we're gonna eyeball the tailpipes next and see how it's gonna look. All right, so Steve and I had the car up and down like numerous times, multiple times, and we got everything pretty good. We ended up using these vintage, new old stock chrome tips that are a little larger in diameter. I like this nice soft rolled edge on it, so we ended up using those, and it actually works out pretty good. We got basically our spacing. We're using these Eastwood magnets as our spacing off the bumper so that we know they're both the same. We got everything run underneath. As you can see, you pretty much get your hand between, or your fingers just about between the gas tank. I know we get a lot of comments about that. I have most of my cars are fairly close like that, and it's totally fine. You can see we added these glass packs back in here that we used on a bunch of the cars. I think it's going to make the car sound even better. And you could kind of see on this side here with the lighting how we repurposed a bunch of the exhaust tubing, and I just cut some of the bends up, slid them in, and now I just got to do a bunch of welding. We had these slip joints here, we had to slice them and open them up because anytime you use an exhaust clamp, it obviously crimps it and it's hard to get apart. So I got to weld all those up too, but I think I'm just going to weld them on the car. I could pretty much get to everything on here. Now it is very close right here at the Columbia, but when and it's also very close to there, but remember the suspension is at full droop, so when we let the car down, we actually didn't realize that it has more droop than we thought. So when we let the car down all the way on the ground, we had what, like,
There's 3 inches in between the rear end and the exhaust on the right side.
yeah, so right now I could barely, I can't get my finger even in between. There might be only like a piece of papers, 16th or less in between the Columbia and the exhaust. But as soon as you drop it on the ground, like Steve's saying, there's 2-3 inches of clearance, and everywhere else is even better. And up at the radius rods, there was like 2 inches of clearance. So running the exhaust this way underneath, it only makes everything easier because there's no suspension parts that are going to hit as the suspension travels. There'll be no issues where when we ran it up inside of the car, up inside the floorboards and everything, you had all that stuff that's moving that you have to make sure it doesn't hit. So it's all pretty good. I'm going to work my way and weld everything from the front back, adjusting as need be because stuff does move when you weld. And then at the very end, we're actually at these old style tips were meant to just put an exhaust clamp on them. Because we want to adjust our exact location with those, we can kind of go all which way. I'm actually going to tack weld them to the pipe. They are steel, they're just chrome plated. And I'm going to tack weld them back here where you can't see it. But that'll lock them in place so that they don't have any issues with moving around after we would clamp them. So that's the plan. I'm going to keep welding and try and get this all welded up here today. Alright, so we got everything all tightened up and got the tips sitting pretty good.
Then we're gonna let it down, and see if it runs. Steve did all the wiring off camera, getting the brake lights, tail lights, license plate lights,
Marker lights.
marker lights,
Tail
all
lights.
that, yeah, all that stuff's all
Yep.
rewired and ran. We had a bunch of wiring in this car that was still the original cloth wiring that we had, was very delicate. So we had rewrapped it carefully with cloth tape, and it was okay just to drive the car for the last couple of years, but now that we're touching things, Steve had to replace the whole, front to back, so that took a little bit of time. So now we're good. Turn signals, they work too.
Oh, yeah, we have turn signals, yep.
So we're gonna let it down, then we'll fire it up. And show all the lights working. Come on, buddy, get away. Come on, buddy. Coming down. All right, so first of all, we're gonna show you all the lights work, which is exciting stuff.
Heck yeah.
Work for Steve, we'll see if it works for me.
Yeah, right, worked the first time, hopefully it's still does.
So brake lights,
Brake lights, yep.
good. And let's see, running lights, marker lights,
Yeah, tail, and the license plate lights, yep.
awesome. And
Left side and right side, excellent.
good, very cool. And now,
You gotta go sit on the floor now.
yeah. Yeah, it does sound way better. Pretty loud. What? Pretty loud. Get on it? Yeah. Yeah, you got a good mark. Yeah, that sounds a lot better. I don't know. About a change the sound, yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, that's good. All right, the rain stopped, so we gotta get a shot of this thing outside. So we're dodging raindrops, but had to find a seat because we sent the interior away to get redone. So I got this Repro Arden valve cover that's great for using as a wheel chock, step stool, also a seat. Just a kind of a running joke with the estate it came from. So we're going to be using that for my seat. I can barely see the steering wheel, but we're going to back this thing out with Steve's help. Don't let me.
quickly dodging raindrops. It's currently raining, but we'll have to wipe the car off. Starting to get a little high in here.
Yeah, getting a little lightheaded.
Yeah. So that was successful. Really stoked on that. The car, you might have heard Steve and I talking. We had these little like motorcycle type slip-in baffles in the tailpipes before, which helped at idles tone down the idle a little bit. But we found that it had a little bit of a weird tinny sound when it was idling. Just being picky, it wasn't that throaty sound we were looking for. It sounded all right going down the highway or going down the road, but this with these little actual mufflers on it or glass packs, it gives it that throaty sound, and that's why we've been using this formula we've been figuring out over every car. These little mufflers, they're cheap, they sound good, they give that old-timey sound, and it's, you know, as you heard, it's nice and a deep sound to the idle as it's got that lope to it. But overall, really happy with how the back end came together. With adding the tailpipes in and actually getting the exhaust done, it sounds good, but also the pipes and changing those tips really completed the look. It pulled the whole bumper taillight situation together. When we first did the taillights, just them alone, that night I was having a crisis, thinking that I did something wrong. It was just a terrible, it didn't look right, and blah, blah, blah. And it just, and even some of the comments in the bumper video, people were questioning, why do we leave the overriders on, or the bumper guards? Why do we leave, the taillights are too narrow together, and this and that. And what I was trying to do with this whole look is we're trying to kind of, I know it's not the safest thing, but we're trying to sort of hide the taillights a little bit from when you're looking at the car as a whole. So from the 3/4 view and the side view, you don't really see the taillights. They don't stick out at you. When you're straight on from the back, yes, you can see them. They are actually fairly bright, believe it or not. So until someone was right up on your bumper, I think you'll be able to see them because they are fairly bright for considering what this car had before. The taillights are probably easier to see now with the 12 volt and those bulbs than the 6 volt that was in it before if we were just driving it totally stock. So really happy overall with how it looks. We do need to still tackle this fender. I'm just going to do that in the next one. I think I've been saying that for 3 videos now. But we are going to tackle that next. Then we are ready to actually spin the car around and start working on the nose of the car. But really exciting to get the exhaust back together, get everything kind of, now the car can move in and out. Unfortunately, it started raining right when we were about to start the car up, so we weren't able to pull it outside with all the bare metal. But imagine this thing looking kick-ass outside. So we will get those shots very soon. But for now, thank you guys for following along with the saga of the Mercury customization all this winter, and a lot more to come to get this thing ready for the springtime. Thank you guys for following along. Appreciate it. Catch you later.